The blazing Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Sophia Zimmerman crawled across the cracked desert floor, her once pristine blue dress torn and covered with dust, her parched lips bleeding from dehydration. 3 days ago, her husband had left her here to die, and now death seemed like a certainty rather than a possibility. The year was 1873, and the unforgiving Sonoran Desert stretched endlessly before her. Sophia's fingernails were broken and bloody from clawing at the hard ground, her skin blistered from the relentless heat. Her husband, Vernon, had promised her a new life in California, away from the scandal that had followed them from Boston. What he hadn't mentioned was his plan to abandon her in the desert after stealing her family's jewelry and money. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. The mirage of a small pond appeared and disappeared before her eyes, a cruel trick of the heat and her failing body. She had stopped sweating hours ago, a dangerous sign she recognized from the medical books her father, a physician, had kept in their home. Sophia collapsed, her cheek pressing against the hot sand. This was it, she thought. 23 years of life ending alone in a barren wasteland. She closed her eyes, surrendering to her fate. The rhythmic thud of hoofbeats seemed like another hallucination until a shadow fell across her face, offering momentary relief from the sun. Sophia forced her eyelids open, squinting upward at the silhouette of a man on horseback. "Good Lord," the man said, quickly dismounting. "Madam, can you hear me?" Sophia couldn't respond, her tongue swollen and stuck to the roof of her mouth. The stranger knelt beside her, gently turning her over. Through blurry vision, she saw a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, concern etched into sun-darkened features. "Hold on," he said, his voice deep and calm. He reached for his canteen, uncorking it with practiced ease. "This is my last water until I reach the next spring, but you need it more than I do." He cradled her head with one hand, bringing the canteen to her lips with the other. Sophia felt the first drop of water touch her cracked lips, and she nearly wept. The stranger allowed her just a small amount at first. "Slowly now," he cautioned. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Sophia managed to swallow, the cool liquid bringing immediate relief to her parched throat. After a few small sips, she found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. "Name's Francis Young," the man said, helping her to a sitting position. "Trail hand from the Double Creek Ranch. What in heaven's name are you doing out here alone, my husband?" Sophia began, then broke into a fit of coughing. When she recovered, she continued, "He left me. Took everything and left me to die." Francis's expression hardened. What kind of devil would do such a thing? He looked around, assessing their situation. "I'm heading to Fort Yuma. It's about a day's ride from here. Can you hold on if I take you with me?" Sophia nodded weakly, not trusting her voice again. "All right then," Francis said, standing and helping her to her feet. She swayed dangerously, and he steadied her with strong hands. "Easy now. Let me help you up on Sadie here." With surprising gentleness for a man of his size, Francis lifted Sophia onto his horse, then mounted behind her. He arranged her so that she was leaning back against his chest, secure in his arms as he held the reins. "Rest if you can," he told her, his breath warm against her ear. "I'll get you to safety." As they rode, Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the solid presence of the man behind her. She had never felt so vulnerable, yet so protected. Francis kept his eyes on the horizon, alert for any sign of danger as the desert stretched out around them. He'd seen his share of suffering in his 30 years, but something about this woman stirred his heart in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Her courage to survive in such conditions impressed him. Many would have given up long before. "Stay with me, madam," he said when he felt her head loll back against his shoulder. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she managed to answer. "Sophia Zimmerman." "That's a pretty name," Francis said. "I'm going to keep talking to you, Sophia, and I need you to stay awake if you can. Tell me where you're from." "Boston," she whispered. "My father was a doctor there," Francis nodded. "Long way from home. I'm from Tennessee myself, but I've been out west for nearly 10 years now. Never could settle in one place too long." He paused, adjusting his hold on her as she slipped slightly. What brought you out this way? Sophia took a shaky breath. Vernon, my husband, he convinced me to come west after my parents died, said we'd make our fortune in California. A bitter laugh escaped her. He only wanted my inheritance. Once he had it, he had no use for me. Francis's jaw tightened. Some men don't deserve the title, treating a woman that way. He offered her another small sip from the canteen. We'll be at the fort by tomorrow. Doctor there will fix you up proper. They rode through the afternoon, the sun slowly sinking toward the western horizon. Francis kept a steady pace, not wanting to exhaust his horse but keenly aware that Sophia needed medical attention as soon as possible. As dusk approached, he guided his horse toward a small outcropping of rocks. We'll rest here for the night, he explained. It's not safe to travel these parts after dark. He helped her down from the horse, supporting most of her weight as her legs buckled beneath her. Francis efficiently set up a small camp, using his bedroll to create a comfortable place for Sophia to rest. I've got some jerky in my saddlebag, he said, retrieving the dried meat. It's not much, but it'll help keep your strength up. Sophia accepted the food gratefully, chewing slowly. The meat was tough, but the salt tasted wonderful after days without food. Francis built a small fire, more for light than warmth in the desert night. How did you find me? Sophia asked after finishing her meager meal. I was sure I would die out there. Francis settled across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. Wasn't looking for you, if I'm being honest. I was tracking a mountain lion that's been taking calves from the ranch. Trail led me far off my usual route. He paused, looking up at the emerging stars. Guess someone up there wanted me to find you. Sophia studied him in the flickering light. He was older than she, perhaps in his early 30s, with deep-set eyes that reflected both hardness and kindness. His hands were calloused from years of rope work and hard labor, but they had been gentle when tending to her. Thank you, she said simply. For the water, for everything, Francis nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. No, Sophia countered, her voice stronger now. They wouldn't. My husband was supposed to be a decent man and he left me to die. Francis was quiet for a long moment. Get some rest, Miss Sophia. We've got a hard ride ahead tomorrow. Sophia lay down, pulling his blanket around her shoulders. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. When she did finally drift off, her dreams were filled with Vernon's laughing face as he rode away, leaving her behind. She woke with a start sometime in the night, a cry on her lips. Easy, Francis's voice came from nearby. He hadn't been sleeping, instead keeping watch over their small camp. You're safe now. Sophia took several deep breaths, orienting herself. I'm sorry, she whispered. No need for apologies, Francis replied. Try to rest, dawn's still a few hours off. Sophia lay back down, comforted by his presence. This time, when sleep claimed her, no nightmares followed. Morning came with a chill that quickly burned away as the sun rose. Francis had coffee brewing in a small pot over a fresh fire when Sophia woke. Morning, he greeted her. How are you feeling? Sophia sat up slowly, taking inventory of her body. Better, she admitted, though still weak. Francis handed her a tin cup of black coffee. This will help, it's strong, but it'll put some life back in you. Sophia accepted the cup, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. The coffee was indeed strong, but the heat and bitterness were welcome. How far to Fort Yuma from here? We should make it by midday if we get an early start, Francis replied, already packing up their minimal camp. The doctor there is a good man, he'll see you right. Within half an hour they were back on the trail, Sophia once again seated in front of Francis on his horse. She felt more alert today, able to take in their surroundings. The desert, which had seemed only hostile before, now revealed its stark beauty in the morning light. Have you been to Fort Yuma before? Francis asked as they rode. No, Sophia replied. Vernon and I were heading to San Diego. He said we'd make a brief stop in Yuma to resupply. She swallowed hard. 3 days ago, we made camp. I fell asleep, and when I woke, he was gone. Along with our wagon, supplies, and all my possessions, Francis's arm tightened slightly around her waist. Fort Yuma's a decent place, army post with a growing town around it. You'll be safe there while you recover. And then what? Sophia asked, voicing the question that had been gnawing at her. I have no money, no family, nothing. Francis was quiet for a moment. One step at a time, Miss Sophia. Let's get you well first. They rode in companionable silence for several hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky. By mid-morning, Sophia could see the faint outline of buildings in the distance, shimmering in the heat. Is that it? She asked. That's Fort Yuma, Francis confirmed. Sits right on the Colorado River where Arizona Territory meets California. As they drew closer, the fort took shape a collection of adobe and wooden buildings surrounded by a wall, with the stars and stripes flying from a tall flagpole. Outside the fort walls, a small settlement had sprung up, with businesses catering to soldiers and travelers. They rode through the town, drawing curious glances from locals. Sophia was painfully aware of her appearance, dress torn and filthy, hair matted with dust and sweat. Francis guided his horse directly to a small building with a sign identifying it as the doctor's office. He dismounted first, then helped Sophia down. Her legs were still unsteady and she leaned heavily on him as he escorted her inside. A middle-aged man with spectacles looked up from his desk. "Mr. Young," he greeted Francis, "didn't expect to see you in town so soon. Doctor." "Miller," Francis nodded. "This lady needs your help. Found her out in the desert, abandoned by her husband. She's been without proper water or food for days." Dr. Miller immediately stood, gesturing toward an examination table. "Bring her over here. What's your name, madam?" "Sophia Zimmerman," she answered as Francis helped her onto the table. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I'm going to examine you now," the doctor said professionally. He looked to Francis. "You can wait outside." Francis hesitated, looking at Sophia. "It's all right," she assured him. "Thank you for bringing me here." With a nod, Francis stepped outside, leaving Sophia in the doctor's care. Dr. Miller's examination was thorough but respectful. He confirmed that she was suffering from severe dehydration and exposure but had no permanent damage. He provided her with more water, this time with salt and sugar mixed in to help her body recover. "You're fortunate Mr. Young found you when he did," the doctor told her as he applied salve to her sunburned skin. "Another day out there and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Sophia nodded, well aware of how close she'd come to death. "Where can I stay in town? I have no money." Dr. Miller's expression softened. "There's a boarding house run by Mrs. Hollister. She sometimes takes in women in difficult situations. Let me send a note to her." While the doctor wrote his message, the door opened and Francis stepped back inside. He'd removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair streaked with sun-bleached strands. "How is she, Doc?" he asked. "She'll recover fully with proper care," Dr. Miller answered. "She needs rest, plenty of fluids, and good food." Francis nodded, relief evident on his face. "I've spoken with Sheriff Davis. He's sending telegrams up and down the line to see if anyone matching her husband's description has passed through." Sophia looked up in surprise. "You didn't have to do that. Man commits a crime like that, he shouldn't get away with it," Francis said firmly. "Sheriff agrees." Dr. Miller finished his note and handed it to Francis. "Would you mind taking this to Mrs. Hollister's boarding house? It's about Mrs. Zimmerman's situation." "Of course," Francis agreed, taking the folded paper. "I can't thank you enough," Sophia said as he turned to leave. "You saved my life." Francis paused at the door. "Get some rest, Miss Sophia. I'll check on you later." After he left, Dr. Miller helped Sophia to a small room at the back of his office. "You can rest here until we hear from Mrs. Hollister. I'll have my wife bring you some clean clothes and food." Left alone, Sophia sank onto the narrow bed, exhaustion overtaking her. Despite the strange surroundings, she felt safer than she had in months. Her last thought before drifting off to sleep was of Francis's steady presence and the unexpected kindness he'd shown to a stranger. When Sophia awoke, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. A clean dress lay folded at the foot of her bed, along with a basin of water and a bar of soap. Grateful for the chance to clean up, she washed as best she could before changing into the simple cotton dress. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a kindly-looking woman carrying a tray. "Hello, dear, I'm Margaret Miller, the doctor's wife. I've brought you some soup and bread." "Thank you, Mrs. Miller," Sophia said sincerely. "Everyone has been so kind." Margaret set the tray on a small table. It's the Christian thing to do. Besides, Francis Young wouldn't have it any other way. He's been waiting outside for nearly 2 hours, wanting to make sure you're settled properly. Sophia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the soup. He saved my life. That sounds like Francis, Margaret said with a smile. One of the best men in the territory, though he'd never admit it. She paused. Mrs. Hollister has agreed to take you in. Her boarding house is for respectable women who need a fresh start. I have no way to pay, Sophia admitted. She understands your situation. You can work in exchange for room and board until you get on your feet. Margaret patted her hand. Eat your soup, dear. I'll send Francis in to see you after you've finished. The soup was simple but nourishing, and Sophia found she had more appetite than expected. She'd just finished the last spoonful when another knock came at the door. Come in, she called. Francis entered, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the confined space of the small room. He'd cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved, though his clothes were still trail-worn. Miss Sophia, he greeted her, you're looking better. Thanks to you, she replied. Mrs. Miller says you've been waiting. You didn't need to stay. Francis shifted his weight. Wanted to make sure you were taken care of proper. He cleared his throat. Sheriff hasn't heard anything yet about your husband, but he's still making inquiries. Sophia nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her at the mention of Vernon. I hope he's found and brought to justice, but even if he isn't, I'm alive because of you. Francis looked down at his hat, which he held in his hands. Miss Sophia, I need to head back to the ranch tomorrow. Boss will be wondering where I got to. He hesitated. But I'd like to check on you when I'm next in town, if that would be all right. I'd like that very much, Sophia said, surprised by how much she meant it. Good, Francis nodded. That's good. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. I want you to have this. It ain't much, but it'll help until you get settled. Sophia stared at the pouch he placed on the bed beside her. I can't accept your money. It's not charity, Francis said firmly. It's a loan. If that makes you feel better, you can pay me back someday when you're on your feet. Sophia recognized the pride that made him frame his generosity this way. Thank you, she said simply, accepting the gift for what it was. Francis nodded again, seemingly satisfied. Mrs. Hollister will come for you in the morning. She's a good woman, strict but fair. He put his hat back on. I should let you rest. Francis, Sophia called as he turned to leave. Will you tell me where to find you? At the Double Creek Ranch, a small smile touched his lips. 20 miles northeast of here, anyone can direct you. He paused. Though I expect I'll be the one doing the visiting for a while. With that, he tipped his hat and left, his boots echoing on the wooden floor of the doctor's office. Sophia sat in the quiet room, the weight of the money pouch in her hand a tangible reminder of the stranger's kindness. For the first time since waking alone in the desert, she felt a flicker of hope for her future. The following morning, Mrs. Hollister arrived at the doctor's office. She was a tall, stern-looking woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, but her eyes held compassion when she greeted Sophia. Mrs. Zimmerman, she said, extending her hand. Eleanor Hollister, Dr. Miller has explained your situation to me. Thank you for taking me in, Sophia said, shaking the woman's hand. I promise I'll work hard to earn my keep. Mrs. Hollister nodded approvingly. That's all I ask. My boarding house provides a respectable home for women on their own. I run a tight ship, no gentlemen callers in private rooms, curfew at 9 o'clock, and all boarders contribute to the household duties. I understand, Sophia agreed readily. The rules sounded reasonable, even comforting after the chaos of the past days, Doctor. Miller provided final instructions for Sophia's continued recovery. Then Mrs. Hollister escorted her through the streets of Fort Yuma to a 2-story building painted a crisp white with blue trim. A sign reading Hollister House for Ladies hung by the front door. Inside, the house was immaculately clean, with simple but tasteful furnishings. Mrs. Hollister showed Sophia to a small room on the 2nd floor, which she would share with another boarder. This is Miss Lucy Perkins. Mrs. Hollister introduced a young woman who was arranging flowers on a dresser. Lucy, this is Mrs. Sophia Zimmerman. She'll be sharing your room. Lucy was perhaps a year or two younger than Sophia, with friendly brown eyes and a welcoming smile. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Zimmerman. I heard about what happened to you. How awful." "Thank you," Sophia replied. "And please call me Sophia." After Mrs. Hollister left them to get acquainted, Lucy helped Sophia settle into her side of the room. "Mrs. Hollister seems stern, but she's got a good heart," Lucy confided. "She saved me when I came west to marry a man who turned out to already have a wife in Sacramento." Sophia appreciated Lucy's candor. "It seems we both had poor judgment in men," Lucy laughed. "That's putting it mildly, but Fort Yuma's not a bad place to start over. I've been here 6 months now, working at the general store. Mrs. Hollister might be able to help you find work too." "I hope so," Sophia said. "I need to support myself now." "What did you do back in Boston?" Lucy asked curiously. "I helped my father in his medical practice," Sophia explained. "I can read and write well, keep accounts, and I have some knowledge of basic medical care." Lucy's eyes lit up. "Dr. Miller might be able to use help in his office. His practice has been growing since the new mining operations started north of here." Sophia felt a surge of hope at the suggestion. Working in a medical environment would be familiar, something she could do well. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Sophia regained her strength, helped with chores around the boarding house, and began assisting Dr. Miller 3 afternoons a week. The work wasn't paid yet, but he promised that would change once she was fully trained in his system. 2 weeks passed with no word from Francis Young. Sophia tried not to be disappointed, knowing he had obligations at the ranch, but she found herself watching the street from the boarding house window more often than she cared to admit. "You're sweet on him, aren't you?" Lucy asked one evening as they prepared for bed. "On who?" Sophia feigned ignorance. "The cowboy who rescued you, of course," Lucy said with a knowing smile. "The whole town's been talking about it, very romantic, like something from a dime novel." Sophia felt her cheeks grow warm. "He saved my life, I'm grateful, that's all." "MMHMM," Lucy hummed skeptically. "Well, either way, you'll see him soon enough. First Saturday of the month is when the Double Creek boys usually come to town." Sophia tried not to appear too interested in this information. "Is that so?" Lucy laughed. "That's this Saturday, in case you were wondering." When Saturday arrived, Sophia took extra care with her appearance. Mrs. Hollister had provided her with another dress secondhand but in good condition, and Lucy helped her arrange her hair in a becoming style. "Just going to the general store," Sophia told Lucy casually as she prepared to leave the boarding house. "Of course you are," Lucy replied with a grin. "And it has nothing to do with the Double Creek Riders being in town today." Sophia couldn't help but smile. "Perhaps I'll happen to see them while I'm out." The streets of Fort Yuma were busier than usual, with ranch hands and miners in town for their monthly supplies and entertainment. Sophia walked to the general store, legitimately needing to purchase thread for mending, but her eyes scanned the crowded street for a familiar face. She was selecting thread when the bell above the store door jingled. Looking up, she saw Francis Young step inside, removing his hat as he entered. Her heart quickened at the sight of him. Francis spotted her immediately, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Miss Sophia," he greeted her, crossing the store to where she stood, "you're looking well." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling shy despite having rehearsed what she might say to him. "It's good to see you. Got tied up with a cattle drive," he explained. "Just got back to the ranch 2 days ago." "There's no need to explain," Sophia assured him, though she was secretly pleased that he felt the need to. "I've been keeping busy myself. Dr. Miller has taken me on as his assistant." Pride showed in Francis's eyes. "That's fine news. You settling in all right at Mrs. Hollister's?" "Very well," Sophia confirmed. "Everyone has been kind." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you heard anything about Vernon?" Francis's expression darkened slightly. "Sheriff got word he was seen in Tucson, but he'd moved on before anyone could apprehend him." "I'm sorry, Sophia." She nodded, not surprised. Vernon had always been good at disappearing when it suited him. "It doesn't matter. I've started a new life here." "A good one from the looks of it," Francis said, his expression warming again. He shifted his weight, seeming uncertain for a moment. I was wondering if you might join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant, unless Mrs. Hollister wouldn't approve. She allows us to dine out if we're properly escorted and return by curfew, Sophia replied, perhaps too quickly. I'd be delighted to join you. Relief crossed Francis's face. I'll call for you at 6 then, at the boarding house. I'll be ready, Sophia promised. The remainder of the afternoon passed slowly for Sophia as she anticipated her dinner with Francis. Lucy was ecstatic when Sophia told her about the invitation, insisting on lending Sophia her best shawl for the occasion. It's not a romantic outing, Sophia protested as Lucy fussed over her appearance. He's just being kind to a newcomer. Of course, Lucy agreed, though her tone suggested she believed otherwise. That's why he's taking you to the hotel restaurant, which happens to be the finest establishment in Fort Yuma, instead of the cafe or the saloon where most cowboys eat. Sophia couldn't suppress a flutter of excitement at Lucy's words. The hotel restaurant was indeed considered the best dining option in town, often reserved for special occasions. At precisely 6 o'clock, Francis arrived at the boarding house. Mrs. Hollister answered the door, subjecting him to a brief but thorough interrogation before permitting Sophia to leave with him. 9 o'clock, Mrs. Zimmerman, the older woman reminded her. Not a minute later. Yes, Mrs. Hollister, Sophia agreed. Francis offered his arm as they descended the porch steps. He'd cleaned up well, wearing what was clearly his best shirt and a freshly polished pair of boots. His hair was neatly combed, though a stubborn strand refused to stay in place, falling across his forehead in a way Sophia found endearing. You look lovely, he said as they walked toward the hotel. That color suits you. The simple compliment warmed Sophia more than elaborate flattery ever had. Thank you, you look very handsome yourself. A flush crept up Francis's neck at her words. Clean, at least. Spent half the afternoon at the barber's getting presentable. The hotel restaurant was indeed the finest establishment in Fort Yuma, with tablecloths, proper glassware, and a menu that offered more than the standard fare found elsewhere in town. Francis pulled out Sophia's chair for her, then sat across the small table. Order whatever you like, he encouraged her. The steak is particularly good here. They settled on their meal's steak for Francis, roast chicken for Sophia, and fell into comfortable conversation as they waited for their food. Francis told her about his work at the Double Creek Ranch, and Sophia shared stories of her new position with Dr. Miller. He says I have a natural aptitude for medical work, she explained. Probably from watching my father all those years. He's even talking about paying me a proper wage starting next month. That's wonderful, Francis said sincerely. You deserve good fortune after what you've been through. Sophia studied him across the table. What about you, Francis? How did you end up at Double Creek Ranch? Francis took a sip of his coffee before answering. Came west after the war. I fought for the Union. Couldn't settle back home in Tennessee after everything I'd seen. His eyes took on a distant look. Tried my hand at different things, mining, freight hauling, before finding my place with cattle. Been with Double Creek for 5 years now. Do you enjoy it? Sophia asked. A genuine smile crossed his face. I do. There's something about being out on the range that suits me. The work is hard, but it's honest, and there's a freedom to it I've never found elsewhere. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing their conversation. As they ate, Sophia found herself increasingly drawn to Francis's straightforward nature and quiet strength. There was no pretense about him, no hidden agenda like she'd later discovered with Vernon. You mentioned your parents passed away, Francis said after a while. Was that recent? Sophia nodded. My father died last year of pneumonia. Mother followed 3 months later. The doctor said it was heart failure, but I think it was grief. They were devoted to each other. I'm sorry, Francis said. My own parents are gone too, father before the war, mother just after. Makes you value the people you still have in your life. Yes, it does, Sophia agreed, though she realized with a pang that she had no one left to value, no family, no close friends from her old life. As if reading her thoughts, Francis said gently, You've made friends here already. Lucy seems like a good sort, and Mrs. Hollister clearly looks out for her girls. They've been very kind, Sophia acknowledged, but it's not the same as having family. No, Francis agreed. It isn't. He hesitated, then added, family isn't always blood, though. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when you need them most. The simple wisdom of his words touched Sophia deeply. You're right, I'm learning that now. Their dinner concluded with apple pie and more coffee. As they walked back to the boarding house in the gathering dusk, Francis seemed to have something on his mind. I've been thinking, he finally said. I'm due for some time off from the ranch. I usually take a week in town every few months. I was wondering if you might allow me to call on you regularly during that time. Sophia's heart quickened at his request. I would like that very much. They reached the boarding house steps, stopping at the bottom. Francis turned to face her, his expression earnest in the fading light. Sophia, I want you to know that I respect you greatly. I understand you've been through a terrible ordeal, and the last thing I want is to pressure you in any way. I know that, Francis, she said softly. He nodded, seemingly reassured. Good, that's good. He cleared his throat. Well, I should let you get inside before Mrs. Hollister comes looking for you. Impulsively, Sophia leaned forward and placed a quick kiss on his cheek. Thank you for dinner and for everything else. Francis stood momentarily stunned, his hand rising to touch the spot her lips had brushed. My pleasure, Miss Sophia, he finally managed to say. I'll call on you tomorrow if that's all right. I'll be here, she promised. Sophia watched him walk away, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. She had not expected to feel anything for a man so soon after Vernon's betrayal, yet there was something about Francis Young that made her feel safe and valued in a way she never had before. True to his word, Francis called on Sophia the next afternoon. Mrs. Hollister allowed them to sit in the parlor, chaperoned by her watchful presence as they conversed. Despite the lack of privacy, Sophia enjoyed their time together immensely. For the next week, Francis visited daily. Sometimes they walked through town, other times they sat in the boarding house parlor. Each day, Sophia found herself looking forward to seeing him more eagerly than the last. On his final evening before returning to the ranch, Francis took Sophia for a walk along the Colorado River. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the water, and a gentle breeze provided relief from the day's heat. I'll be back in town in 3 weeks, Francis told her as they stood watching the river flow. The boss is sending me to escort a shipment to Fort Yuma. Sophia tried to hide her disappointment that it would be so long before she saw him again. I'll look forward to it. Francis turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Sophia, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. These past days with you have been the happiest I can remember. Sophia's breath caught at his words. I feel the same, she admitted, which frightens me given how wrong I was about Vernon. Francis nodded in understanding. You have every reason to be cautious. I'm not asking for any promises. I just wanted you to know how I feel before I leave. I'll miss you, Sophia said softly. May I write to you? Francis asked. I'd like that very much. In a bold move, Francis reached up to touch her cheek gently. Sophia, may I kiss you goodbye? In answer, she stepped closer, tilting her face up to his. Francis leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss that conveyed both respect and affection. It was brief but left Sophia feeling breathless when they parted. I'll count the days until I return, Francis promised. The 3 weeks of Francis's absence passed slowly for Sophia, despite her busy schedule at the doctor's office and the boarding house. His first letter arrived after a week, delivered by a ranch hand passing through town. The handwriting was somewhat rough, but the sentiments expressed were heartfelt and sincere. Sophia replied immediately, sending her letter back with the same messenger. Thus began a correspondence that sustained them both during their separation. In her letters, Sophia shared more of her childhood in Boston, her father's medical practice, and eventually the circumstances that led to her marriage to Vernon. She explained how, after her parents' deaths, Vernon had courted her with charm and false promises, pressing for a quick wedding that she later realized was designed to give him control of her inheritance. Francis's replies were equally open, revealing his experiences during the war, his struggles afterward, and his gradual healing in the Western Territories. He wrote of his hopes for the future, a small ranch of his own someday, a place to put down roots after years of wandering. By the time 3 weeks had passed, Sophia felt she knew Francis better through his letters than she might have through casual conversation. There was something about writing that encouraged honesty, allowing them both to express feelings they might have hesitated to voice in person. When Francis finally returned to Fort Yuma, their reunion was joyful but tinged with the knowledge that he would only be in town for 2 days before returning to the ranch. "I've been thinking," Francis said as they walked together on his second evening in town. "The ranch keeps me away too much. I've been considering other possibilities." "What sort of possibilities?" Sophia asked. "Fort Yuma's growing. There's talk of the railroad coming through next year. A man with some cattle experience could do well starting a livery stable here in town." Sophia's heart quickened. "Are you considering such a venture?" Francis nodded. "I've saved most of my wages these past 5 years. It wouldn't be a grand establishment to start, but it could grow." He glanced at her. "I'd be in town permanently." "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," Sophia said carefully, not wanting to presume his motives. Francis stopped walking, turning to face her. "Sophia, I'm not just thinking about business opportunities. I'm thinking about you, about us. These past weeks, your letters have meant everything to me. I want to court you properly if you'll allow it." Joy welled up within her. "Yes, Francis, I would like that very much." Over the next 2 months, Francis continued his work at the Double Creek Ranch while making inquiries about property in Fort Yuma suitable for a livery stable. He visited town whenever possible, and their relationship deepened with each encounter. Sophia thrived in her position with Dr. Miller, who officially hired her as his assistant with a modest but sufficient salary. She moved from sharing a room at the boarding house to occupying a small private room, a sign of her improving circumstances. It was during Francis's October visit to town that they received unexpected news. Sheriff Davis summoned them both to his office one afternoon. "Got a telegram from the marshal in Tucson," he informed them. "They've arrested Vernon Zimmerman for fraud and theft. Seems you weren't his first victim, Mrs. Zimmerman. He's wanted in 3 states." Sophia felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, vindication, and a strange sense of closure. "Will I need to testify?" "They have enough on him already," Sheriff Davis assured her, "but they would like a written statement from you about what he did." "With your permission, I can take your account now." After providing her statement, Sophia and Francis left the sheriff's office. They walked in silence for several minutes, Sophia processing the news. "Are you all right?" Francis finally asked. Sophia considered the question carefully. "Yes," she realized, "I am. Vernon being caught doesn't undo what he did, but knowing he can't hurt anyone else brings some peace." Francis squeezed her hand. "You're remarkable, Sophia. Many would be consumed by bitterness after such betrayal." "I was bitter," she admitted, "for a time. But then someone showed me kindness when I needed it most, and that changed everything." Francis's expression softened. "I have something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Would you walk with me to the river?" At the riverbank, in the same spot where they had shared their first kiss, Francis took both of Sophia's hands in his. The late afternoon sun gilded his features as he looked into her eyes. "I've secured the property for the livery," he told her. "I'll be leaving Double Creek at the end of the month to start building. I'll be in Fort Yuma permanently by Christmas." "Francis, that's wonderful news," Sophia exclaimed. "There's more," he continued, his voice growing serious. "Sophia, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to have someone to care for, someone who cares for me in return." He took a deep breath. "I know it might seem soon, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Sophia, and I want to spend my life with you." Tears filled Sophia's eyes as Francis knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Sophia Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she whispered without hesitation. "Yes, Francis, I will." Joy lit his features as he stood and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was deeper than before, filled with promise and shared dreams. "I don't have much to offer yet," Francis said when they finally parted. "The livery will take time to establish," and Sophia placed her fingers gently against his lips. "You offered me water when you had none to spare. You gave me life when I was certain of death. There is nothing more precious you could ever give me." By December, Francis had established Young's Livery and Stables in Fort Yuma. The business was modest to start but showed promise as the town continued to grow. He purchased a small house not far from the livery, just 2 rooms with a kitchen, but it was clean and solid, with space for a garden in the back. They were married on Christmas Eve, 1873, in the small church in Fort Yuma, with Dr. and Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Hollister, Lucy, and a handful of Francis's friends from Double Creek Ranch in attendance. Sophia wore a new dress of pale blue silk, her one extravagance, purchased with her own savings from working with Dr. Miller. As they exchanged vows, Sophia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been crawling across the desert floor, certain her life was ending. Now she stood beside a man who had not only saved her life, but had taught her what true love and partnership meant. Their wedding night was a revelation of tenderness. Francis was gentle and considerate, his touch awakening feelings in Sophia she had never experienced in her previous marriage. In his arms, she found not just passion but profound connection, a sense of coming home to where she truly belonged. Life as Mrs. Young suited Sophia perfectly. She continued her work with Dr. Miller 3 days a week, finding fulfillment in helping others. The rest of her time was split between making their small house a home and helping Francis with the bookkeeping for his growing business. By spring, the livery was thriving. The promised railroad construction had brought more people to Fort Yuma, and Francis's reputation for fair dealing and quality care of horses spread quickly. They were able to add a proper bedroom to their house, as well as expand the stable to accommodate more animals. It was in April, as the desert bloomed briefly with spring flowers, that Sophia shared special news with her husband. "Francis," she said one evening as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, "I visited Dr. Miller today, not as his assistant but as his patient." Francis immediately looked concerned. "Are you unwell?" Sophia smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "Quite the opposite. We're going to have a baby." The joy that transformed Francis's face was something Sophia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious treasure on earth. "A baby," he whispered in wonder. "Our baby." The months that followed were filled with preparations and anticipation. Francis worked tirelessly to ensure the livery's success, often taking on additional work shoeing horses or repairing wagons to set aside extra money for their growing family. Sophia continued working with Dr. Miller until her condition became too advanced, using the time to learn everything she could about childbirth and infant care. Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Hollister organized a gathering of the town's women to present Sophia with handmade baby clothes and blankets, a gesture that moved her to tears. In late November 1874, almost exactly 1 year after their wedding, Sophia gave birth to a healthy son whom they named Thomas Miller Young, honoring the doctor who had been so instrumental in their lives. Francis was transformed by fatherhood, his natural protective nature finding new purpose in caring for his wife and son. He would often bring little Thomas to the livery, proudly showing him off to customers while explaining the business he would someday inherit. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Fort Yuma continued to develop around them. The railroad arrived as predicted, bringing new opportunities and prosperity to the area. Francis's livery expanded to include a smithy and wagon repair shop, requiring him to hire 2 assistants to keep up with demand. By the time Thomas was 3, the Young family had moved to a larger house on the edge of town, with proper bedrooms for everyone and a spacious yard where their son could play safely. Sophia had begun offering basic medical care from their home, treating minor ailments and injuries for those who couldn't afford Dr. Miller's services. On a warm evening in the spring of 1877, Francis and Sophia sat on the porch of their new home, watching Thomas chase fireflies in the yard. Sophia leaned against her husband's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "When you found me in the desert." Francis's arm tightened slightly around her. "Often," he admitted. "Sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat, dreaming I reached you too late." Sophia turned to look up at him. "It was meant to be, I think, all of it. Even the terrible parts led us here." "I believe that too," Francis said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Though I'd have preferred you didn't have to suffer so much along the way," Sophia smiled. "Life is full of unexpected turns. When Vernon left me in that desert, I thought my story was ending. I never imagined it was just beginning." "Speaking of beginnings," Francis said, his hand moving to rest on her slightly rounded stomach. "Have you thought more about names for this little one?" Sophia covered his hand with her own. Their second child, due in the fall, was a constant source of joy and anticipation. "If it's a girl, I was thinking of Alina after Mrs. Hollister." Francis nodded approvingly. "And if it's a boy," Francis, Sophia said without hesitation. "After his father, the best man I've ever known." Francis blushed, still uncomfortable with praise even after years of marriage. "We'll see," he murmured, but she could tell he was pleased. As darkness fell, they called Thomas inside for bed. The nightly ritual of washing up, story time, and prayers was one of Sophia's favorite parts of the day. Tonight, Thomas requested the story of how his parents met, a sanitized version that emphasized Francis's heroism without the more frightening details of Sophia's abandonment. "And Daddy gave you his last water," Thomas recited, clearly having memorized this part of the story. "Even though he was thirsty too." "That's right," Sophia confirmed, tucking the blanket around her son. "That's the kind of man your father is, someone who thinks of others before himself." "I want to be just like Daddy when I grow up," Thomas declared with the certainty only a 3-year-old could muster. "You already are in many ways," Sophia assured him. "Now sleep well, my love. Tomorrow is another day." After Thomas was asleep, Sophia found Francis in their bedroom, already changed for the night. She slipped into his arms, feeling the familiar comfort of his embrace. "Our son wants to be just like you," she told him. "I told him he already is." Francis smiled against her hair. "He has your kindness and your quick mind. Poor child will be unstoppable." They settled into bed together, Francis's hand resting protectively over her growing belly, a gesture that had become habit during her first pregnancy and resumed with the second. "I never thought I'd have this," Francis confessed in the darkness. "A family, a home, a wife who loves me. After the war, I figured I'd live out my days alone. And I never thought I'd trust again," Sophia replied, "or love so deeply." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for saving me, Francis, not just my life, but my heart." "We saved each other," he corrected gently, "and we'll keep doing so every day for the rest of our lives." Sophia fell asleep in her husband's arms, secure in the knowledge that what he said was true. Their story, which had begun with a desperate act of kindness in the desert, would continue to unfold with each passing day, a testament to the healing power of love and the unexpected ways in which lives could be transformed. In September 1877, Alina Margaret Young came into the world, a healthy baby girl with her father's eyes and her mother's delicate features. Thomas proved to be a devoted big brother, constantly wanting to help care for his new sister. As the years passed, the Young family thrived in Fort Yuma. Francis's business expanded to include a freight company, capitalizing on the increased commerce brought by the railroad. Sophia established a small clinic that served the growing community, particularly women and children who might otherwise go without medical care. They would go on to have one more child, William, born in 1880, completing their family. All 3 young children grew up knowing the story of how their parents met, how a man with nothing but the last drops in his canteen had saved a dying woman in the desert, and how that act of selfless kindness had blossomed into a love that withstood every challenge life presented. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Francis and Sophia returned to the spot by the Colorado River where he had proposed. The town had grown around them, but the river flowed on, constant and true, much like their love for each other. "I never told you," Francis said as they stood hand in hand watching the sunset reflect on the water, "but that day in the desert when I found you, I'd been ready to give up. The ranch was struggling, I was lonely, and I couldn't see a future that held any promise." Sophia squeezed his hand. "You never mentioned that, giving you that water, helping you when you needed it most. It gave me purpose again." Francis turned to face the woman who had been his partner for a quarter century. "You think I saved you, Sophia, but the truth is you saved me too." Sophia reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the lines that time had etched around his eyes and mouth. "Then we're even," she said with a smile, "and I wouldn't change a moment of it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Francis Young pulled his wife into his arms and kissed her with the same tenderness he had shown on that first evening by the river. Some things, they had discovered, only improved with time, and the love between a cowboy and the woman he had once found dying in the desert was chief among them.